Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the How to Find a Supervisor workshop. My name is Sarah Topa. I'm a Senior Partnerships and Communications Officer at IMS, and I'm going to be leading us through the presentation portion. So getting started, as you get started in your search for a supervisor, the first thing you want to do is determine your research interest. So within the IMS, with all the diverse research that we do, we have broken it down into these 7 what we call research themes. You see them listed here. That's cancer, cardiovascular, respiratory, musculoskeletal, endocrine, gastroenterology, infection immunology, neuroscience, brain health, population health education, regenerative medicine development. So then when you're going to use our faculty search tool, which is the database on our website of all our nearly 700 faculty members that each have a profile on there, you can use the research theme category to start narrowing down your list. And then there's also a category for research interest, so you can define it even further. So you can put things in there like transplantation, stem cells, qualitative research. There's other categories as well if you want to work at a particular hospital site like CAMH or Sick Kids. And then using that different search criteria, you're going to get a workable list. The other really important resource you should be using is our Supervisors Recruiting Students document. So we put a call out to faculty regularly throughout the year, and those people who are actively looking for students will put themselves forward to be included in this document, which was just updated recently. So using those 2 tools, you should be able to get a really good workable short list of faculty that you want to contact. So once you do have your short list, you want to look up for each faculty member their lab website, their hospital web profiles, and look through their recent publications. You just want to really get a clear sense of their research and what type of lab they run. So in terms of faculty eligibility, some faculty will absolutely announce when they're seeking new students. Some prefer not to say, and then they'd rather review the skill sets if an individual student reaches out. And many of our faculty are awaiting the results of grant funding applications. So they're simply not in a position to say if they're taking a graduate student until they know that that funding has been secured. So you can keep that in mind when reaching out. If you would like to work with someone who hasn't specified they're accepting new students, you're still more than welcome to contact them. Just make sure your email is carefully tailored. Always keep in mind too, the faculty's appointment status. So this is always listed on their IMS web profile because you don't want to reach out to somebody who's not eligible to supervise you. So an associate member, non-restricted, can only supervise master's students, whereas a full member can supervise PhD students as well as master's students. So once you're at the point when you're ready to be contacting faculty, it's just important that you keep in mind that these emails are essentially like a job application. So it is your potential supervisor's first impression of you. So you want to make sure that it's great. So remember to tailor the email to the specific PI and their research. Explain why you're interested in the field and how you see yourself fitting into their lab. You know, it's okay to state your long-term goals. If your plan is to eventually go to medical school, you can say that up front. The faculty will be supportive. Attach a CV or resume and a transcript. Keep the email relatively brief. You really don't want it to be more than 2 short paragraphs. Always proofread for spelling and grammar. And we always recommend copying any relevant lab managers, administrative assistants, or research coordinators. So faculty members will often have multiple web pages. They'll have their IMS faculty profile, they'll have their hospital or research institute web profile. Many will have a lab website. So you might need to do a little bit of digging to see if you can find all the different staff members that it would be good to copy on those emails. That will really increase your chances that the PI will see the request. So following up, if you don't hear back within a few weeks, like you are Absolutely encouraged to send a brief follow-up email. As you know, faculty have many competing demands, and they're interested in students who show initiative and are proactive and persistent in a professional way. If a PI has indicated that they're not able to accept you, please respect that decision and move on to contacting the others on your list. So if a PI is interested in accepting you as a graduate student, we encourage you to schedule a time to speak with them. So a virtual or in-person interview will help determine if the lab is the good fit for both of you, because it is a reciprocal relationship. So use this opportunity to ensure you understand the lab's research, what your specific research project and role would be. Ask questions about the management of the lab to ensure it fits, with your unique working and learning styles. We also suggest that you ask the PI to share contact information for a few lab members or former graduate students. So when you do then reach out to the current or former lab members, they're a great resource to help you make sure that you have all the relevant information you need to make this big decision. So you can ask them questions such as, what's the PI's leadership style? Do you enjoy working with the PI? Why or why not? How often did you meet with the PI? Individually and as a team? Was it weekly, bi-weekly, monthly? Is the atmosphere collaborative or more independent? You can share a little bit about yourself and ask that if you're this particular type of learner, do they think you'll be supported in the lab? You can ask questions around expectations of, are you fully in the lab? Is it a hybrid situation? Are you working remotely from home most of the time? Any question that you think would help you decide if you want to move forward. So once you do have a supervisor secured, just keep in mind that you need to notify the IMS admissions officer, that's Hazel Pollard. And after IMS approves the supervisory arrangement and you have set up your U of T email address, you'll be invited to complete the GEMS Student Supervisor Agreement form online. So that outlines the funding commitment. If you have further questions after this workshop, we are going to open it up to a Q&A shortly. Of course, you can always connect with Hazel. And I also want to introduce you to Alex and Sajeevan. They're on this call and they're going to be sharing their experiences finding a supervisor in a little bit, but they are our new prospective student ambassadors. They're senior PhD students and they are a great resource. So if you want a few more tips about finding a supervisor, or you have questions about grad life or resources or IMS student groups, all that other great stuff, please feel free to email them at pa.medscience@utoronto.ca, and they would love to offer their guidance. So thank you all for listening. I'm now going to hand it over to my colleagues who are going to share some further thoughts with you on how best to find a supervisor, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. Thank you.
From the PI experience, I just would like to give a couple of tips. So I always tell people, students that come to interview with me, to shop around. So don't restrict yourself to one individual that you think maybe that one individual is your favorite individual, but please go around and search for 2-3 individuals that, if you are even in the size whether do I want to work in endocrinology, do I want to work in neuro, is this lab more like high throughput screening gene, or is like hands off the bench? So it is important that you interview with more people. And what I advise also to students is to come back for a second chat. So I give an overall idea of what, the lab is doing. And of course, I suggest them to reach out to people in my lab, former students, current people. But it's also important that you go back, sort of pause a little, think about, and then eventually come back. Very often in interpersonal relationship, it is important also to understand if you feel as a student that you will be able to work for the next 2 years if you are a master student, or 5 years if you are a PhD student with that individual. So it's not just like what we appear to be in our website or what we publish. You need to have also a feeling. Do I think I will be able to work? Because I tell everybody, I got my 2 degrees, and I did my life and I did my training, but these are two very important and informative years of your life, and it is important that you know that you can work with that specific question. So shop around and look for supervisor. And the last slides related to the GEMS agreement. Once you reach the GEMS agreement and you feel like it's like you reach your goal, it's done, you just need to sign, please review the GEM agreement very, very carefully, because there are some very important things about what is expected from you, what are your duty, what it is expected from the supervisor. For instance, there are very important aspects over intellectual property, the data, the importance of applying for scholarship. So this is my 2 words of wisdom, and now we can move to students that actually had that experience of their own. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just start it off. So hey everyone, so I'm Sujeevan, a fourth-year PhD student, and so I feel like my way of getting supervised was very traditional. So it might not be helpful for everybody, but it is very relevant. As Isabella mentioned, what I kind of did was I kind of shopped around before I chose my supervisor, because I wanted to have someone who I could work with, very supportive environment. And in particularly, I chose a supervisor who I can meet regularly, because sometimes you might see certain scientists who will be very busy and you might not get to see them as often. And so I made sure that the PI that I chose, I had weekly meetings with them. I chat with them before I kind of chose them. I was quite fortunate in the sense that I was working with a supervisor in undergrad, and I had a chance to just continue my same PI right into grad school. So it made everything a lot less difficult for me. But I guess the aspect of finding supervisor is still the same. The fact of writing an email, keep it concise, not too detailed, because they'll have some time to read your email. So don't make it like an essay long, because they're not going to read through the whole thing. And attaching your transcript as well as your CV makes it easier, because they're less likely to have follow-up emails. If they see you, they're qualified, and you're a good candidate, they'll definitely get back to you. What else can I say? I mean, that's all I can say for now, and maybe I'll let Alice go, and then I can chime in if I need to.
Yeah, thanks, Sajid. I think we make up a good dichotomy here for everyone, because mine's less traditional. So I did my undergrad at Wilfrid Laurier University, and so coming here, I had to start from scratch, I guess. And back at Laurier, I did developmental psychology research, and now I'm doing cell work for kidney transplant. So very much a pivot, but still that research experience. And I guess during the interview process with my current supervisor, I just really stressed how much I was willing to pivot, and how keen I was to do the research. And then even if you don't have kind of maybe the background that you think you should have, these supervisors will still, kind of take a chance on you. And especially if you're a great student and you show them that. So yeah, as Isabella said, I just like to go to a point. While you are being interviewed for a job for the position, which is what the PowerPoint said, please keep in mind that you are also still interviewing the supervisor as well. So don't just answer the questions they ask you, ask some back in return. Ask them how many students they've had already. Ask them how many of these students have stayed longer than the design time. Ask them any questions that you're curious about that you'd want to know, because you don't want to be like, oh, I wish I would have asked this. Just ask it. They're very nice and they'll be happy to answer. And the answers will definitely give you more insight as to whether or not, like Isabella said, you want to commit to this person for 2 or 5 years. Because if you ask a question and they can't answer it, that's also very telling. But obviously here at U of T, we have great professors, a lot of them, and great supervisors. A lot of them will be able to answer your questions, but just ask your own as well. Don't think that it's a one-sided interview. It really is a two-sided interview. The other thing I want to stress is that yeah, I'm also 4th year, just like Saji, except I'm a January start. So I started in January 2020, but I applied summer of 2019. And when I applied, there was no supervisors recruiting students document. So please definitely use that to your advantage, because that definitely streamlines the process of who is accepting. When I was finding a supervisor, it was strictly basically like cold call emails. And if I thought their research was interesting or they were in the field that I wanted to go into, I had to just do an email, and the beginning of the email had to say like, hello, are you accepting students? Because I didn't know. So now you know who is actually taking. So that already kind of narrows down, because I know U of T, especially IMS, we have a lot of faculty, which is fantastic, but it also is a little daunting. So definitely use that. And we also just revamped the faculty search tool. So it's a lot easier to find faculty in areas that you are interested in, because now the search is kind of streamlined there too. So those are definitely the two things that I would suggest. Those are your kind of tools in your toolkit. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have about my experience, or any like more pointed questions. I'm happy to elaborate.
If I may, Saji and Alex, I would also like to add something else. You guys have experience from the angle of being PhD student, so you are sort of like committed to a longer period. Of course, in IMS, we also get lots of master students. And the master students are typically, not atypically, but a majority of them, particularly in the field of research I have, which is reproduction, want to, after the master, take the chance to go to med school. Do not be afraid in your interview to tell what your, goal, for immediate and future goal, because supervisor like us are a little bit older than you guys. And if you come and you want to appear what you're not, to say, no, I absolutely want to reclassify. Sometimes a supervisor can detect an individual. So I think that the conversation that is direct, firm, sincere, and honest can go a long way. I have a big record of students that got accepted in med school after their master. They all have committed themselves for those 2 years, because when I tell them, we need your commitment for 2 years, these 2 years are very formative. It's not only for PhD, they are also for masters. They are very formative, they are very essential, and is an experience that not only open horizons to understand basic science, qualitative science, in the context also of med school, but it permits you to go to international conferences. This is something that you might want to ask also to your supervisor. Will I be able to get exposed to international forum, to get connection with people across the globe, to present your research? And you might then decide to transfer. And if it's not, and you devote yourself and you show your commitment to the supervisor, I can guarantee that lots of supervisors will be willing to take you on board in their lab. And importantly, at the end of your master, you might have the plus to get a glorious letters that can go for references. Either you want to go to industry for PhD, master student, whatever you want to go in your future, and you build like sort of a legacy. So it is very important, as Alex and Sajay say, when you go to your interview also the supervisor. This is very important. And be honest to yourself.